Well, hello there, dear listener, and welcome to the first video of 2020 and the first video of this new decade for me. I hope everybody is doing well, and I hope you guys are having a fantastic new year already. Mind you, I know this will go live on the second day of the year, so there hasn't been much time to establish how this year is going to go, but I, of course, as always, hope that you have a fantastic year, fantastic January, and I hope this new decade is a start of something new for as many of you as it can possibly be. That all said, I want to go ahead and get this story on the road here, so I hope you guys are prepared, because this one is going to be 6 stories involving strange creature encounters, or paranormal creatures. I'm not sure how to word that. All I know is these are all going to be strange experiences involving unexplained or unexplainable creatures. So, enjoy. I'm not sure if this is where I should be sharing this personal experience. I was hoping that somebody could shed some light on the experience I had some time ago. One day, I was returning home with my boyfriend, and we parked at the open car park near his apartment building. It must have been past midnight. I was holding his right hand, and suddenly he pushed away my hand, grumbling that it felt heavy. I asked him what he meant, cause it was just hand-holding, but I saw him dragging his right leg, the side where I had been holding his hand, so I simply moved to his left side to hold his left hand. It's important to note that I didn't see any reason as to why he should be dragging his feet. He was just wearing his shorts and slippers. A few minutes later, he started kicking his right leg a couple times, as if there was something clinging onto it. On the last kick, a brown ball of fur rolled out in a semicircle before us, and stopped about a meter or so in front of us. It was literally a brown ball of fur, not a rat or a cat, and it was the size of an adult human head. It, the creature, remained there for a few seconds, watching us, and I somehow felt like it was surprised he had kicked it off. And then it rolled away toward a nearby drain and disappeared from our view. I asked him, "Did you just see that?" And he said, yes. He isn't really a believer of the supernatural, and thought maybe it was just a rat. But I don't know what kind of rat clings onto your leg and is invisible until you kick it off. Do any of you know what it could have been? I used to live in a small city by the sea, which bordered onto the countryside. My house was near the countryside, which had a large patch of thick woods. Usually, I would go out with my friends. Keep in mind the story happened when I was around 11, and one day we decided to venture into the woods to make a den. When out there, my friend told me of people going out late at night and seeing things, which I just shrugged off as a ghost story. We reached a patch of open land, which is where we decided to build our den. I went into the woods to get some large fallen branches to build with, when I noticed there was a jar of ashes amongst the trees and bushes. Obviously freaked out, I turned back to go to my friends, when I noticed large scratch marks on a tree, and they were way too big to be a cat, and it didn't look like they were made with a knife. I went back to my friends, and since it was getting dark at this point, we were freaked out, and we decided to just go home. We started walking back through the trees to find our way back. We got separated since we had to go different ways to get home. I was on edge the whole way, and once I was almost at the end of the woods, I saw something big dash through the trees extremely fast and heard branches and leaves snap. At this point, I was too scared to stick around, and I ran home. I'm not sure what it was, and to this day, according to old friends, people still talk about the woods being off. If you guys have any idea as to what it was, I would love to hear your theories. Also, I don't believe it to be any of my friends messing with us. For some background, my great-grandmother, who passed away in 2010, came from a family of Swiss immigrants who arrived in the US in the late 19th century. They owned a bunch of land near Montpelier, Idaho, where they worked a dairy farm. This area is pretty rural, and back then I imagine it was even less populated, so the story might seem all the more creepy through that lens. I actually heard this secondhand from my grandpa. I don't know why my great-grandmother never told me this herself, because I would have loved to have asked her for more details. Based on her age, I would say this happened in the early 1920s, when she was around 7 to 10 years old. She and her sisters were in the car with their dad when he had to pull over for a minute and run in to grab something from one of the farm buildings. They are out in the middle of nowhere, basically, with nothing but fields for miles, not another person in sight. While my great-grandmother and her sisters were waiting in the back seat, some kind of huge, hairy creature suddenly appeared out of nowhere and stared at them through the car window. According to my grandpa, my great-grandmother said this creature had a very human-like face, but clearly wasn't human. It was almost pitch black and had very mangled hair. There was something really off about its eyes, and the fact that it wore a long, flowing white robe that was out of place for the time period and location. She described its expression as curious and a bit confused, but not exactly malicious, though it obviously scared the crap out of them nonetheless. The girls screamed and cried until their father heard them and came running back to the car, but by the time he had got there, the thing had wandered off out of sight, and they never saw it again. My great-grandma was an extremely sweet, kind, but no-nonsense kind of lady. She wasn't really the superstitious type, and she would always just kind of chuckle at my over-the-top obsession with things like Harry Potter. So she wasn't the type to sort of make this kind of story up. According to my grandpa, she attested to its truthfulness until her dying days, never once taking it back or denying it as some kind of childhood prank on their father. Does anyone have any idea what she and her sisters might have seen? My initial thought was Bigfoot, but the white robe thing kind of threw me off. I've never heard a Bigfoot account where the creature was wearing clothes. So, just to start off, this story is about a friend of mine, not me. Anyways, he has to drive back and forth between towns a lot because we live in a very small town, less than 2,000 people, and he was just driving and talking to a friend on the phone when he saw a roughly 12-foot tall humanoid-looking creature standing in the middle of the road. He says it was too dark to tell very much about it, but he could clearly see limbs and fingers on this creature. As he passed by the creature, it turned its body toward him. Needless to say, he floored it and cranked up his music. He also told me that he felt a profound feeling of dread throughout the entire encounter, and he really doesn't get scared very easily. I was driving with him along the same road today when he told me about it. We didn't see it, and there were no visible traces of the creature that we could see from the car. Any thoughts? Just as an FYI, this was in Montana, on the roads between Columbus and Laurel. So, I live with my mom, and one night I woke up early. I went to my mom's room, and she was up too, on her phone. I go in her room and sit next to her for a couple of minutes. It was dark, back in the summer, around July or August, and about 4:45 a.m. It was dead quiet, and then out of nowhere we hear something fall outside. It sounded really heavy, but we didn't hear anything on the roof, so it sounded like it fell from the sky. Even the flooring vibrated when it fell. It sounded as if it was at least 200, maybe 300 pounds. Anyway, it fell right outside our window, and it started growling, like a legit demon or something. It sounded demonic, and the way it was growling, it was like it was saying something in some kind of demonic language, like if you talked into a recorder and then reversed it. It was really creepy. Then it sounded like it was running to the other side of the backyard. It was stomping and still growling the whole time. Me and my mom were freaking out. We both then turned off our phones because of the light. Literally no animal could have related to what this thing was. The closest thing to even somewhat compare would be the sound of a bear. I was about to go outside, because I'm a dumb 14-year-old, but my mom stopped me. It went away for like 10 minutes, we turned our phones back on, and then it came running back. It growled even more, then we heard scraping. We didn't know where it was, but we heard hard scraping. It then ran to our left, there's a fence to our neighbor's house really close, and it kept running, and then it was just gone. It was so loud and then disappeared. It didn't hit the fence or anything, but me and my mom think it came from another dimension. Like, it fell from the sky. It was horrible. But what do you guys think it was? Me and my mom have been wondering this for so long, and it still terrifies us. If you've had any experiences like this, please do tell. We haven't really heard anything like this that has happened, but any help would be appreciated. We have countless stories of hauntings, but this is one of the worst yet. Okay, so I have no idea what we saw exactly that night. I have searched everywhere for sightings or even myths around the area where we saw it, and I've found nothing. If anyone has any idea what we saw, or even if anyone else has seen it, please let me know. My husband and I think it might be a wendigo, but I don't know. I haven't heard anyone else say they've seen anything like it in RRG. I guess I want help figuring out what we saw and what to do after the night that I'm about to describe, but I think we've had some close encounters with it since. My friends and I go camping a lot. My favorite place is Red River Gorge, Kentucky. We go there often, and I've been ever since I was an infant. I'm now 28 and married with a kid and still go. It's the closest place to where I live, where you can see the Milky Way pretty much every night. It's perfect for stargazing, and I've seen a shooting star every clear night that I've been there. When we go without our kids, we will night hike to a good looking point and just stargaze for hours. Our first experiences with night hiking, we would go to trails we knew well and were used frequently during the day. One with log fences and gazebo resting places. The most used trail is a trail in North Bridge State Park that leads up to the Natural Bridge. This trail is about 2 miles uphill, depending on your starting point. I've done this trail every summer of my life, and I could do it blindfolded. It has wooden steps, carved rock steps, long handrails, multiple sitting points under a roof, trash cans, but after reaching the main trailhead, it has no lights at all. It's used often, and while it's uphill, the difficulty is pretty low. As long as you have a good grip on your shoes and some water, you'll be fine. My friends have done it with me multiple times, and are confident in it as well. Hiking this trail at night is not allowed, but it's the woods, and I've never really been one to care about closing times for the literal outside. When we used this main trail to hike to the top, we would park in a lot designated for the pool in Hoedown Island. You walk across the road that leads to the pool, and you're at the first trail marker. You go up gravel for a while and past the Natural Bridge State Park Lodge. There's a waterfall and some lights, so it was best to go fast and watch out for rangers that would tell us to leave. Then you walk across the road, and there's a mini shelter to sit in, or a small rock wall to rest your legs. Then, it's the beginning of the trail to the top. The night was weird to begin with. As soon as we started the hike, clouds took over, and it appeared we'd be walking for nothing to even stargaze at. But we went anyways, just in case it cleared out by the time we got up there. In the beginning, it was just normal paranoia that was keeping us stressed and quiet, it seemed. You know you've reached the bottom of the bridge when you see a giant wall of limestone. During this time, there was a gazebo that's set to the right of this wall, and the trail continued and followed next to the wall. Where you come from is a fairly steep part of the trail, and the gazebo is welcoming. My husband, my best friend at the time, and I all sit on the gazebo steps. The bench is under a roof and even darker than the rest of the outside, so we just stayed on the steps. And we were facing to where we were all looking down the trail that followed the limestone wall. We each had a bright LED headlamp and a handheld flashlight. We don't usually look at each other when we night hike because the lights are so bright. We sit in a line like the Lord's Supper and walk in line, or staggered, so we don't blind ourselves. It is after hours at this point. No ski lift rides had gone on for hours, and the rangers had already done their sweep and left right before we got out of the car and headed up. We left no time between them making sure the trail and top were clear and us starting our hike up. The ski lift takes you up to the top, but there are workers that stay and do counts and only leave after it's clear. I guess I have to make these points because that's what I was thinking when it seemed out of nowhere that a girl with a headlamp began to walk down the trail we were looking out at. She was in a sundress and flip-flops. The hike is uphill, and while it's fairly easy to hike, it is not easy with no water or real shoes. She would have had to have hiked up and down to this point with no food or water. Her light was bright, and when she reached where the trail turns from, in front of the gazebo to down where we came from, she stopped. She just stood there straight on like how a human is present in an anatomical drawing. She was looking directly at us, all sitting there, and her light made me bring my hand up to shield my eyes. She didn't turn away from our lights at all, or even seem bothered that she had 6 LED lights aimed directly at her face. I said hello. She said kind of with the pause between every word or something like, "Hello, how are you?" I said something like, "Good, how are you?" And she took even longer pauses, and then said, "Oh, I'm fine." She then just stood there still with her hands at her side and facing and staring at us. Her light made it impossible to really see her face, and it was so bright, and I had my hand up the entire time until she just turned and walked slowly down the trail part we had just come up. She got to a part where the trail turned, and we saw her light just stay in that one spot for a minute until she turned and the light faded out of sight. We waited for a while before continuing up. I kept making comments about how weird that was, and everyone else just made it out to be me always being afraid, but no one ever came after her. She had done this hike alone, at night, and somehow without being found by any of the rangers. We got up after a bit and started back to the top. It felt like it took much longer than it ever had in the past, but we made it to the top. There's stone steps named Fat Man Squeeze that get you to the top of the bridge, and you can walk across it and whatever. Going up and being on top, we could hear twigs snapping, almost alternating from the left and then the right. We lay down and tried to stargaze, but the clouds were even thicker then. It was also miserably hot. We could hear voices at times, and my husband kept checking for people that we heard, but he never saw anyone. We saw a flashlight, but never anyone attached to it. And then we heard a bird call, but it wasn't like a real bird noise at all. It sounded like a person was making bird calls, like rhythmic and not really natural. I was convinced that we weren't alone and hadn't been alone, but also I'm the most easily spooked. I asked to leave as soon as they were ready to, and they were ready right then and there, and that scared me even more, that they were just as afraid as me at this point. We began going down the way we came, and it felt like it was taking so long. We were going steady and quick, and it was all downhill, but we were not making any ground, it seemed. It's hard to explain, but it was so weird that at one point I even said it out loud. I said, "This feels so much longer," and they agreed with me. I kept looking behind me with the flashlight, and my husband kept looking out to the sides, and my friend kept hers mostly forward. I kept feeling like we were being watched, and I couldn't figure out what footsteps were ours, or if they were all ours that I was hearing. I would turn in the direction of any noise but not see anything. When my husband was walking, he kept saying he was catching eyes with his flashlight. Usually you can catch raccoon eyes spying on you or some animals like that. He was afraid maybe a bear or a big dog or something, and he never got his lights on whatever eyes they were long enough to see an animal's size or shape. Now we're hiking down the semi-flattish area, compared to the downhill hike we've been doing at least. The log fence or handrail or whatever it is on our right side. We are in a row, walking within reaching distance of this barrier, and my husband just stops walking altogether and says, "What's that?" But the question is more like an alert, and I move my hand lamp in that direction, and I don't see anything at first. Then, both of his lights catch a shape, and then my headlamp catches it, and I move my hand lamp to center and catch it as well, while my friend simultaneously finds it in her light as well. All 6 lights shine onto and kind of reflect off of a light gray creature. It's bent in a crouching position, kneeling on its right leg, and starting to turn toward us. It starts to slowly stand up, and my mind is racing. It looks human, but it's too big. People mistake human shapes for what's actually bears in the woods often, but this thing was skinny. It is thin and big and almost white. It's so light gray, and its skin resembles dolphin skin. There's a shine to it, and our lights get reflected a little when they're on it. It gradually comes to a full standing position in front of us. Its head is long and its eyes are in a human position on the face in front and not on the side like animals. But I couldn't really see any other facial features. Just big, almost empty holes or pits that were its eyes. It looked directly at us in our lights. The way it stood up was intimidating, almost like when a snake rises up and flexes their necks, all crazy to show prey that they're stronger and smarter. It was like it was stepping up to a fight, from crouching and then turning to stand in front of us. The arms hung down low and the hands seemed long too. Its hands had to be by its knees. I would guess it stood 9 foot or so and not that far in front of us. No hair at all, and its head was large as well. I couldn't process what I saw and I was frozen. Then, I feel my husband hitting me on the back and yelling, "Run, run, run!" I start to understand that we have to get away from this thing, and it pivots and runs to the right, going backwards on the trail so it could get around the barrier onto the trail behind us. We take off running the rest of the way down the trail, knowing that this thing just took off much faster than us, and after it had crossed from behind the barrier, it would be gaining on us quick. We didn't talk at all, because when we tried, it felt almost like we would get caught. We kept running as fast as we could, but some areas were just so steep. It never felt like we were out of the sight from this creature. As we made it to the trail beginning with the gravel, we could hear something to the side crashing down through the forest. We ran until we got to the car, and then we drove as fast as we could, and as soon as we got to the main road, the sky cleared up, and the stars were out. When that thing looked at us, I knew it was smarter and faster than us. I knew that if we hadn't seen it, that it could easily have taken one of us and gotten away. I think the only reason it hesitated was because so many of us saw it at once and we stayed together. When we made it back to where we were staying, all of us took out our phones and wrote a note for what we saw happen. We haven't spoken about it until we looked at each other's phones and the stories were the same. Without a doubt, we had seen something real. As an addendum here, the user actually added an edit with some pictures that I'll put up on the screen, and here's what the edit reads. I'm adding some links here for those interested. Okay, first link is for a picture-by-picture view of the hike to the top. I'll insert the link to the virtual hike in the description. Second link is for the points where we saw the girl and the creature. And the third is for a more recent sketch of what I saw. And there you have it. 6 stories involving strange encounters with unexplained or unexplainable creatures. yeah, that last one makes me never want to go hiking, ever. Not that I'm much of a hiker as is, but if I were, I would second guess myself every single time from here on out if I was near Kentucky, which I probably never will be. Nothing against Kentucky, I just don't live anywhere near there. Anyway, I hope everybody enjoyed that. If you did, please consider liking the video. That actually helps a ton, you have no idea. Also consider subscribing to the channel. As you could probably see, we recently hit our 100 subscriber mark and have surpassed that by, last check, I think 15. I am so grateful, you have no idea. But if you would, please consider hitting that subscribe button. Lets me know you're interested. And also, if you want, please leave a comment for me. I would love to hear from you, and I try my best to heart and respond to every single comment on every single video, mostly because it lets you know that I see what you say, and it makes me feel better because I'm interacting with those of you that enjoy my content, and that, I don't know, it just makes me feel warm inside, I guess. Anyway, so that's how we're going to start this decade off, with a really long outro. Shocker, shocker. I hope everybody has a fantastic day, night, weekend, weekday, whatever it is for you. And stay warm out there if you're in any parts of the world where it's currently winter and snowing, as it is here. But until the next video, sleep well.